And it'll just be interesting because this labor market is a tricky one right now. We have a lot of individuals who are not working since COVID. There's depending on different estimates, but I saw one estimate that 3.5 million men who are 25 to 35 years old, which is kind of the prime building your career, building your knowledge, building your experience years, are not working. So 3.5 million kind of prime age, working age men are not even participating in the labor market. They're not in unemployment. They're not in the numbers there. They're just in their parents' basement playing video games on opioids. So you have like this problem where Americans have not been working. And I think COVID fundamentally changed our relationship with work.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We have a special guest today, Andrew Crapuchettes. And you are, I'm doing my best. You're at RedBalloon, which we'll talk about soon. But first, let's talk about you. Where did you grow up in these United States?
In these United States with that horrible last name. Although, honestly, I really liked the last name of Crapuchettes. I think one of my jobs, I was working at a university, and they had this hard and fast rule that your email address had to be the first letter of your first name and then the first 5 of your last name. And if you do the math on that, I was crapu at uofi.edu.
I like that, yeah.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Okay, so I grew up in San Francisco Bay Area, did the .com thing down there. Actually started working when I was 16 because I didn't think that school was that fun. And I did think that earning money was super cool. And my friends were like driving their parents' station wagon. I had a convertible Mustang, and I'm like, I think I'm winning. So started working when I was 16. Got to do really cool stuff for a .com. Turned 21 on an expense account. I was in Tokyo. I remember for my 21st birthday, I was like, well, here I am. With customers at a karaoke bar. Crazy. Got tired of kind of traffic and liberals, so I left the Bay Area at the ripe old age of 22. Moved up here to Idaho, where I live now. We have 60 acres, 10 minutes from the office. I've got 5 kids. I got 3 big dogs and a parrot. Married to a wonderful woman. And when I got up here, there weren't a lot of jobs. So beautiful country, not a lot of jobs. So I'm like, fine, I need to make jobs. So I kind of went on this tirade of building businesses. I built a 3D printing business, student information software business, labor market data business, and had 6 successful exits over the years, which was awesome. So that's my quick story, and that leads up close to where we are with RedBalloon. But that's who I am.
Sweet. What part of the Bay Area did you grow up in?
Yeah, I was born at Stanford Hospital, lived in Sunnyvale, California, and then Mountain View for a little bit, Los Altos, we popped around a little bit. My dad was like an early tech guy in the Bay Area, like helped install the first computers at Stanford University. And his dad helped invent the microwave oven. And so these are like deep technology people. I've got uncles in the Mensa Society. It's actually... it's funny, the extended family, we had them up for Thanksgiving, and we live on the top of a hill here in Idaho, and we're standing there looking at the front porch. I'm like, that's a cool view. And Uncle Chuck, who now lives down in Boise, he's like, that's really neat. I'm like, I wonder how far I could see from here. And so to give you an idea of what kind of family I came from, they're like, he spent the evening downloading the topographic maps for a 200-mile radius and calculating based on the curvature of the Earth and how atmosphere bends light, how far I could see. So he went ahead and answered the question, and then gave me a heat map, and evidently I can see 115 miles from my front porch, which honestly, like, that's super cool. I wish I'd asked, like, hey, Uncle Chuck, I wonder if I could have a flying car, not how far I could see, because evidently was going to solve it. But, you take what you can get.
Yeah, what are you going to do? I mean, anti-gravity propulsion is right now just a right-wing conspiracy theory, so we'll get there.
Yeah, right.
And, yeah, what you're describing is the Coriolis effect.
Right.
And I think on flat terrain, it's 6 miles, so 115 is pretty good.
Yeah, we're really high up. My house is at 3,100 feet. And basically... the Coriolis effect, there's some mountains in Montana that are poking up over the curvature of the Earth. And because they're tall, we can see them that far away.
It's dope. Why did you choose Idaho of all the places that you could have gone?
Yeah. Honestly, there's a church I wanted to go to. There were friends going to the University of Idaho. And the thing is, when you're 22 years old, which is when I moved up here, and you move somewhere, if you don't like it, you move somewhere else. Like
Sure.
it doesn't have to actually be a big decision. When you're 47, like I am now, and 5 kids and a wife and all that stuff, it would be a big decision to move somewhere else. But right then, it was like, I don't know, I'll go try Idaho. If I don't like it, I'll go somewhere else. So, yeah, there wasn't an enormous amount of thought that went into it. Good church, friends up here. Yeah, sure, why not? We'll do this.
So when you leave the Bay Area, what's the first business that you start up there? I mean, I guess you were 22. So what was the you get there and you realize there's not a lot of employment for people, and
right.
You want to do something about that. You said a 3D printing company, but that would have probably come later, right? Because 3D printing was relatively, it's pretty expensive back then. I think it's a little bit easier now.
Yeah. So I guess I should give more detail. Basically, when I moved up, I was working for this .com in the Bay Area, and we were doing collaborative 3D design, which was kind of an interesting concept of what if you could have CAD, computer automated design. What if you could have multiple people looking at the same model at the same time and kind of learning? Like if you're building a hairdryer, and you're building the plastic enclosure, well, what if the screw manufacturer is like, actually, if you make the tolerance on that a little bit lower, it's going to be cheaper and we can get you a better screw. And so basically, like, how do you do that? So that's what we were doing in the Bay Area. It was super cool, and I was working with amazing companies like Applied Materials and others who were doing 3D modeling for all of their big machines. I got tired of living in the Bay Area, and I told my company, hey, I'm going to move to Idaho. And they're like, well, actually, why don't you just keep working for us? So I actually worked for them for a year. So I was an early adopter of A, leaving California, and B, working remote.
Yeah.
But I had like a DSL connection. Like it was just, the internet was just not ready for that kind of thing. Yeah. So learned a lot. It was awesome. But so I worked for them for a year. Then I worked for the University of Idaho. That's where I got that really cool email address. Kind of building 3D curriculum for them. Basically, how do you allow people to understand how to do 3D modeling, because it was still pretty new at that point. And then honestly, like as a young man, I'm like, well, if I have any extra time, I should actually be trying to bless other people. So I was doing free IT work for all of the nonprofits in town. So Habitat for Humanity, various church offices, which is a side note. It's kind of funny because you think like, if somebody who's 22 years old walks into your building, into your business, and says, hey, I'll do your IT work for free, the answer should be no, because he's about to steal all your stuff. Like, it's a really bad idea, right?
That's probably Kevin Mitnick social engineering you so he can steal all your stuff.
Exactly, right? But at the time, I actually had the best of intentions, and people didn't even know what a network was. So I'd come in and build them a LAN, and okay, let's actually build a backup system. And I just did it because I was like, well, I've got skills, you guys have needs, why don't I just go ahead and solve them? Anyway, connected to that, there was a professor at the University of Idaho who had started this labor market data company. It was just him, and he had a couple projects, and he couldn't figure out how to print. And so he calls one of the nonprofits and says, hey, I don't know how to print. Do you know anyone who does this? There's this guy that keeps showing up and doing stuff. You should call him. So anyway, he calls me out of the blue and like, hey, I can't print. I'm like, I'm sorry for you. Who are you and why are you calling my cell phone? And so I'm like, well, I'll come over and figure that out for you. So I come and I'm like, hey, you guys have got problems here, because they had like this stacks of zip drives with their current model, and they were doing these huge economic models, and they were doing everything one-off. So I'm like, how about I will strap in and help you. You give me a little piece of your business and pay me $25 an hour, and I will make you profitable and help this go. And so we started by doing this labor market data, which sounds super boring. But labor market data is actually fascinating in that most of the biggest decisions in a person's life are uninformed by data today. So like you can use your phone to decide, do I want to go, what restaurant do I want to go to? Do I want to go on a vacation? Whatever it is, right? But there's no real good information on which classes should I take in university that are best fit for me and the labor market demands when I'm done with college. Or if you're a Java developer, should you learn Hadoop or should you learn SQL? There's not real good information for that. So we started building this labor market data, and we actually sold it to community colleges to help them kind of gear curriculum and gear student advisement so that students actually understood what labor market data was. Because the reality is a lot of students show up and they're like, you know what, I'm going to get a psychology degree. Well, a psychology degree is the highest unemployed degree in America, and you should know that going into it. But the thing is, there is no full disclosure. There's no labor market outcome for education. And so we were trying to push colleges to really serve students and prepare them for a job, not just get as much money out of them as possible and tenure their professors. So we did that at scale. So that was the first business. And this is going to sound stupid, but it is what it is. Our first business goal was to create 50 jobs earning $50,000 a year in our little town in Moscow, Idaho. And 50,000 doesn't sound like a lot, but in Idaho it goes a long way, especially whatever that was 20 years ago. So we basically had this vision of like, if we can create prosperity for individuals, if we can give them an opportunity to have a great job, a lot of great university students who were then leaving and wanted to stay in town, there just weren't good jobs for them. And so can we create jobs? Can we create prosperity? And as a side note, I understand economics enough. I really like to eat, which it is, you could probably tell from a distance if I wasn't on the camera, but I love to eat. And I thought, if we have good restaurants, I'll have better food. And the only way we're going to have good restaurants is an economy vibrant enough for people to have extra money to go out to dinner. So that was my biggest motivation in creating jobs for people, is better restaurants.
Yeah, so there's a couple of things I want to discuss, and I'll go in reverse order. The first is this idea of creating prosperity. Two sides of that you touched on. One is that it makes your area better, right? Mm-hmm. It's this idea of noblesse oblige, right? That if you're in a position of power, you should extend that power out to other people to lift them up as well, right? It's kind of,
that's right.
It means the obligation of the nobles, essentially. But we don't do nobility anymore, so there's still this obligation. The other part of it, which you didn't really talk about, but I'll interject, is that in the same way that it costs 7 to 12 times more to create a new customer than it does to save a customer that you already have, you end up with high turnover rate, especially in top-level industries, you end up spending somewhere around 6 to 9 months worth of your exiting employees' and salary to get a new employee, both hired and trained. 6 to 9 months of their salary, plus the salary that you have to pay the new person. So this is something that gets overlooked in economics a lot. Like these days, people want a 4-day work week, or they want an astronomical minimum wage and all this other stupid shit. But the reality is, there is a way to do business in a way that benefits everybody, right?
Yes.
And also save quite a bit of money yourself and get probably higher output because you're getting people that are more motivated to be in that position. So, as capitalism comes in for a lot of lumps these days, from people who don't have the temerity to start their own business or get up off their fucking ass, frankly. But there's a way to do this stuff that makes a lot of sense. Now, another thing you said, or you didn't really say this, but this is an observation. Like yourself in the early 2000s, most of our early engineers had no formal education in technology. And when I say most, I mean 95% had no formal education. They were in the Navy or the Air Force or just hobbyists in technology or something like that. And then later on, this massive education industry stands up. And now, as it stands in early 2025, we have 3.5 million open engineering jobs with a college degree requirement. We're only graduating 750,000 people with STEM degrees a year, right? We are way off here. Like, there's no, I can't imagine what coder needs 4 years of school to do what they're doing. That is nonsense. I mean, we're talking about a 16-week course. If somebody's got the proclivity to do that type of work, in about 16 weeks, you can get them up to speed on pretty much any language that exists. It's insane what we're doing right now, and it's costing us now. Well, big news today with some AI out of China, right? But we're way behind on some of this stuff.
Yeah, no, we absolutely are. And here's the other thing is that it's the business model of these universities, right? They want to make money on a 4-year degree because they're getting paid all 4 years. And I've hired a lot of engineers out of coding boot camps that were way more competent, because generally they're people who've actually been in the real world. They had a real job, and then they're like, I want to add this skill set because I know that I can earn a lot more money doing that. And so those folks are amazing. I actually hired mechanical engineers. I'm like, I'm going to train you to code because it's possible, and you're super smart, and you want to work. And when you do this, when you think differently about your employees, we're like, how do you grab good people? You know, I talk about that 50 at 50. How do I create prosperity? How do I create jobs? I hired a lot of college students. Well, guess what? The loyalty was really, really strong with those folks, and the turnover was like zero. I literally did not have to hire new people. I had one guy who had never coded in his life. He was a music major, but he was wicked smart. And I'm like, I'm going to teach you to code. 17 years later, he's a world-class data scientist experimenting with different AI models because he was willing to learn, and he wasn't going to learn any of those things at a university.
Yeah.
The other thing that's kind of interesting, so we did a survey of all of our employers. So we've got at RedBalloon, and we'll get to that in a second, but we got about 5,000 employers, and then we surveyed all of the public square employers as well, which is about 80,000. So we asked all these people about a 4-year degree. And they basically said, and obviously there's some examples where that's not the case, but they said if someone has a bachelor's degree on their resume from a major university, is that a positive, a negative, or a neutral? And 40% said it was a neutral. They literally didn't care whether that bachelor's degree was on there. And again, this is a sample size of small center-right businesses, right? So it's a representative sample of about 8 million businesses in America, not all of them. But basically, they didn't care about the degree. And then 42% said that they actually saw it as a negative that there was a bachelor's degree from a major university on their degree. Well, and so we asked them, like, why is this? They're like, well, they didn't actually learn how to operate in the real world. And in fact, they were given a lot of Marxist ideas and trained to be an anarchist. So why would I want to hire that person and put them in my 4 walls? So not only do you have $200,000 in debt, but you've actually hurt your employment opportunities with small, center-right businesses who simply don't want any part of that. Now, we want engineers who are, been trained to build our bridges, and there are a lot of occupations that I'd really like them to actually have done that education. But there's a lot of waste in higher education today.
Yeah, and it's weird. Like a couple weeks ago, Elon and Vivek Ramaswamy got themselves in a little trouble, suggesting we need to use more H-1B visas to catch up with China. And you can feel how you want to about that. It's certainly not like we should not have ever allowed ourselves to get into a position where importing labor would be necessary, especially this type of skilled labor, right? That's nonsense. That isn't to say that there isn't a gap, though, right? So something has to be done about this rapidly. I'm hoping Trump takes up that mantle. I know he's addressed a lot of stuff, and we're only 1 week in as of about 20 minutes ago, or an hour and 20 minutes ago. But there's a lot of stuff to be done, and it isn't just in the tech side. It's also in the energy side. This stupid bullshit that we've been doing with this Green New Deal stuff that got kind of ushered in as the Inflation Reduction Act, all of it has to be repealed. I mean, we're not just behind in technology to China. We're behind in energy production, right? This new AI model they have out is way more efficient, right? Because they're actually putting energy into it. So where it takes one problem solution for our best AI model takes about $100 million right now, right, to create a module or whatever you want to call it. For China, it's about $5.5 million now.
That's right.
And not only that, but they've nearly doubled their energy production relative to the United States just over the past 3 years. This is, to me, probably the biggest thing going right now. Certainly there are physical threats with what's happening at the border. I trust our military and federal agents to be able to handle that. And if we need to get involved, we'll do that as well. I'd love that, actually. But I trust we'll be able to handle that. The thing that is really happening, though, in the same way that we could have won World War II, but having the atomic bomb helped, right? This is the new Manhattan Project. Whoever wins this AI race wins the world, Like you will have influence everywhere, always. You'll be able to solve problems faster than anybody else. It's not necessarily a zero-sum game. If your engines are competent to the same level, right, then it's almost digital and mutually assured destruction. But we have to fucking get going here.
Absolutely. Well, and it's not just like not only are we behind, but the regulations and all the DEI horribleness that has been happening in the workplace has been slowing down our best engineers, right? When you have a good engineer and they have to spend their time going through a DEI training that tells them everything about themselves and their coworkers and the world around them, and they have to do sensitivity training and then microaggression training and employee reviews and all the things, they're not going to do their best work. They're not going to be able to innovate. The other thing is when everyone's offended in the workplace all the time, right? And we need to get the talent. Like, we need to make sure those people are actually in the workplace, whether it's H-1B or we need to be training people. But I think a lot of it is we just need to stop holding them back. These are very smart people. And innovation, the process of innovation, they say that every good idea comes from 9 bad ideas. So it's your 10th one that's going to be, that's a pretty good idea. And if you are so worried about offending people in the workplace all the time, you're never going to throw out those bad ideas for someone to build off, to be able to collaborate and say, well, that's a bad idea, but there's a part of that that makes me think about this over here. And that's where real innovation happens. And you can't have real innovation if everyone's offended all the time in the workplace. And that has been the America that we live in today. And so some of these great engineers, and I've talked to them because with RedBalloon, we've helped place them at companies where they are free, where they can throw out bad ideas and not have to worry that some snowflake is going to go to HR about them. They're starting to have a lot more fun, and they're starting to innovate again. But I think we lost that innovation because we were obsessed with something that had nothing to do with work, right? You saw that with Silicon Valley Bank when they went out of business. I talked to employees who were there, and they said, look, we had weekly microaggression training. Well, what does that do? It demoralizes everyone that's there. It tells them that what their job is not the most important thing of their job. And they need to care so much about the feelings of their other workers that they can't actually think about solving customer problems, blessing customers, keeping the money safe, keeping the bank in business. And so I think that's also a big part of it is we need to unleash the people we have. And stop holding them back with just the horrible workplace policies we've had over the last several years.
Yeah, I mean, a good example of that is Elon Musk firing 75% of the staff at Twitter and no one noticing.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, if you, man, if ever there was a use case for getting stupidity out of your organization, there it is.
That's right.
Yeah, and it's, I really wonder, obviously these people aren't thinking, they're just trying to push Marxism into everything that they can, but I wonder if they understand anything about education and work psychology, like the idea of recall, the idea of contact switching, and all these things that interrupt workflow during the day. I mean, we've been studying this shit for a long time now, and we know exactly how it works. I mean, for those who don't know, contact switching, let's say you're in the middle of a project, you're looking through spreadsheets or you're writing code or whatever you're doing. Somebody comes in for 2 seconds and interrupts you. It takes you 15 minutes to get back into the workflow that you were in before. 15 minutes, right? If that happens 4 times a day, an hour, right? An hour of your day, 12.5% of your day is gone.
You basically get nothing done if you have people constantly coming in.
And that's why we noticed with like a lot of I want federal employees to be at work. I don't think the federal government should exist in the way it does, frankly. But if you're gonna take money to sit at home and then cry on the internet when you can't do it anymore, then fuck you. But we did notice during certain parts in certain industries, productivity actually went up when people were working from home in a lot of ways, right? Or telework or whatever. It wasn't every industry, but I think coding is probably going to be one of those because I've got coders, I've got editors like film and TV editors here who, to be honest, they work weird hours from like 7 at night until 3 in the morning, and they're fueled by like Hot Pockets and Mountain Dew and shit. And that's not my life, right? But they do something that I can't do, and if that's the way they do it, then I don't really give a shit. As long as the work's getting done, I don't care. So
that's right.
Yeah, I mean, these are things that we really need to look into. But you have to be focused on impact, effect, and not any of this other stupid nonsense that we've been focused on.
Well, and I think that and the work from home thing is kind of a funny thing because I'm a big fan of being in the office when you can. I think there's some interaction with other human beings that is important, but you do lose some of that focus time. That I encourage people like, look, if you have a big project, stay at home, go put on headphones, lock in because you're just going to get a ton more done. And like the point has to be what's your productivity, right? You think about the whole economy. Like we're always focused. I'm a capitalist, so I care about my business. I want to make money. I want to be a blessing to my customers, to my employees, to my shareholders, all of that, right? But if you think about the whole economy, it's the sum total of the productivity of all the people. What are the things that we're doing? And obviously, as we're using AI and machines, we're going to make the humans way more productive. But it's the productivity is the output. And the problem is there's this trend in a lot of work from home where they have a boss who's not really paying attention, where it used to be people would talk about underemployed, and that's if you have a bachelor's degree, in engineering and you work at Starbucks as a barista, right? That's underemployed. You have too many skills for what you're doing. Now they're talking about overemployed, where basically people work from home and they have 2 or 3 or 5 different full-time jobs, and they're not actually doing any work. They're just trying to move the ball forward as minimal amount as possible in each one of those. So they've got all their laptops open. They're answering Slack on all of them. They're jumping on Zoom calls as needed, but they're actually not doing any productivity. And there's some, at least some people believe that some of the government workers who have not been showing up have also found themselves in their full-time job where they aren't actually doing things for either. Now, I'm actually a huge fan of government workers not getting anything done because I don't want to pay them to not get anything done. But a lot of the things they were getting done were actually hurting the economy anyway and hurting me, hurting my family. So I'm okay with them not working, but I'd like to not pay them and then have them not work. So that's where you have to be careful when you do the work from home thing. You need to make sure that the output and the productivity is managed. You have to be more intentional about it so you don't get one of those overworkers who has a bunch of jobs, which is just theft at the end of the day.
Yeah, it is. I mean, that's primarily what's been going on with the federal government. People taking multiple. I mean, it's like your cab driver who's on a telemarketing call at the same time when he's driving. You think he's talking to you. You're like, dude, what the fuck are you doing? Drive the vehicle and shut up. So I want to go back to something else you said about the relationship between, I guess, end user production and component production. So you're 3D printing. Your example, I believe, was hair dryer, which is kind of ironic considering you don't have any hair, but it's the hair. I'm just kidding. It's the
most efficient haircut.
It is. That is true. Yeah, you're an engineer, so it makes.
I'm an economist, man. This is efficiency.
But like a hair, if you're printing the casing for a hair dryer, and one of the other or the top line producer says, "Hey, we've got these better screws now. You can make that a little less." And then everybody makes money. That's something that needs to happen more. But with regulations these days, that kind of we would call it interagency or whatever, but that kind of communication between organizations to get a product out more efficiently is really important, right, for the economy especially, because usually and there are some cases when companies save money on production, they just pocket the expenses, but most of the time what they do is expand their company, right? Because they want to make more money, and expanding your company requires to patronize more local vendors usually, and also hire more local people. That's usually what it is, right? I mean, I don't believe wholeheartedly in the trickle down stuff that Reagan talked about. I think that's kind of I think the verbiage is kind of demeaning, frankly, but there is something to the better we all do, the better we all do.
That's exactly it. And I mean, that's why I wanted this 50 at 50 is I want to see my community do better. I want better restaurants so I can eat more, better food. But at the end of the day, anytime you're talking to an entrepreneur, they are trying to make money if they're a good one. But they cannot make money unless they're actually positively impacting the people around them, right? Sure, they could be running a mine in Africa, and that's not necessarily positively impacting. But in America and the system we have here, An entrepreneur is taking enormous personal risks, right? And Peter Thiel talks about this. George Gilder talks about this, where you're now kind of ball and chained to your business. It's not like it's this free thing. You now you're owned by your business in a lot of ways, and you're working really hard. But when you do that, there are enormous amounts of upsides and an enormous amount of upside for your community. And that's where I've always been passionate, right? Even one of the businesses I did a management buyout where I sold the business to the people who were working there because I wasn't involved anymore. I'd helped start it, get it going the right direction. But I'm like, I want you to build wealth for your families. I want you to feel the tension and the excitement of ownership. And if you can do that, it's going to change your mindset as a person. Where it's harder to be a liberal when you have to pay taxes, when you have to cover payroll, when you have to have the real friction of the free market, right? Now, I sold it to them. I wanted them to build wealth, and I structured the deal such that they could afford it, and it built wealth for me as well. So I'm not opposed to those kind of things. But as entrepreneurs, as people who are grappling with things, coming back to the 3D printing thing, that business failed because the internet wasn't fast enough, honestly, to do collaborative 3D design. We were just too far ahead on that particular business, but the concept was really good, right? How do you allow people to interact real time and use technology to do that? And an economy is really like, how do we get people doing great things and use technology, whether it's AI or machines or robotics, to make people more productive? Everyone's worried about AI taking over their job. I mean, I had a lot of college students that I'd hire, and I'd say, here's the thing. And they'd come to me and be like, hey, can I have a list of things to do? I'm like, look, if I can give you a list of things to do, then I'm going to give that list to a machine who's going to do it a lot cheaper and a lot faster and a lot better than you. You're a creative person. You need to figure out what you need to do, not just ask me to tell you everything you need to do. And so if you're worried that AI is going to take over your job, there's a chance you're not actually pushing yourself and being creative. Because there will always be creative jobs for human beings to be done. People who used to, work at, Chinese laundry or whatever, where they had to wash all the clothes. Well, of course, machines took over those jobs. Did they lose their job? Yes, they got a better job. And they had to push themselves and learn something else. So anyway, that was a long roundabout way of saying I actually think AI is going to be a good thing. It's going to drive prosperity as long as we use it well. Yeah,
AI for sure. I agree with that. AGI is another conversation. If we end up creating a fucking Terminator situation or whatever, Skynet. But
let's try and avoid that.
Yeah, but AI for sure. I mean, so people that used to manage books for major companies using a pencil, right? You had a credit and debit ledger, and you did it all manually. I mean, fuck that, right? It's a lot of work.
Horrible.
Desktop computers and particularly databases, not just full-on databases, but even reduced databases like Excel and shit like that, revolutionized that process, which ultimately allowed you as an employee to service more accounts, which allowed your employer to service more clients, which made you more money at the end of the day.
That's right.
So
yeah, absolutely.
We're going into the same thing right now. Like if you're not out there, and there are some jobs that this doesn't apply. If you're a truck driver or a plumber, who fucking cares, right? There's no it's going to be 50 or 100 years before that job is under threat from some robot or anything. But
yeah, I don't know. I mean, self-driving truck, I can imagine having an impact on it.
Well, they still have to have an operator on board for now.
For sure.
For at least for now. 10 or 50 years. But yeah. But if you're working in an office job and you're concerned about AI displacing you, you should be learning how to manipulate AI right now. Look,
absolutely,
it is. You can find forget about college or night school and that stupid shit. You can find classes online to teach you how to code. I mean, it's not that big a deal.
Yeah,
if you understand how to conjugate verbs and stuff like that. If you understand how language works in general, you can learn how to code. It's not super difficult, right? I mean, certainly there are people that are really good at it versus people that are okay at it, but just to be good at manipulating, it's the same thing. Here's the way that I would start. If you're interested in this sort of stuff, I would start researching how to manipulate Grok or ChatGPT, how to use prompts and stuff like that. Because if you learn how to use prompts the correct way, one, you can bypass a lot of the bullshit filters that are on there, which is nice. But two, you can create all sorts of stuff, massive amounts of whatever it is, work, product, content, whatever it is, in a short time that would take somebody else months to do, right?
That's exactly it. I mean, back to your pencil and a spreadsheet example, like imagine the accountant who all of a sudden figured out how to use software, whether it's Excel or, QuickBooks or whatever, and all of a sudden that person has 10 times the productivity of the pencil and paper person, right? So that's the moment we're in right now. You can be a construction worker who's using a rock to put in your hammers or put in your nails, or you can go get yourself a nail gun and go a lot faster. And AI is basically a nail gun for anyone who is going to spend a little bit of time to figure out how to use it. And again, you want to be careful because AI is not completely unbiased. It's trained. It's a model that's trained. It's going to be trained by engineers. We saw that with Google, with some of the crazy things that their AI was producing. So you just need to be careful. But the same way that, you can also screw things up with a nail gun and, hit a pipe and bust, there's bad things that can happen. But if you are not figuring out how to make yourself 10 times more productive with AI today in whatever job you're in, just give it a minute and you are going to lose that job.
Yeah.
So, and as human beings, we have to be pushing. We have to feel that tension where it's hard. And if it's not hard, it's probably something bad's going to happen soon. I mean, what is it? Nissim Taleb always says, we need the tension. We need the market tension. We need even our bodies. If we lay in a bed you'd think that'd be the safest spot for us. You lay in a bed for a couple of weeks, your blood's going to pool and you're going to die. We need to do hard things. We need to go out and do attention. And the point of AI is to make human beings more productive, in my opinion. And if you're figuring out how to do that, you're going to win. That applies to if you're in sales, if you're in accounting, if you're in marketing. If you're not figuring out ways to use this new technology to wildly accelerate your productivity and what you're able to accomplish, then you're missing out.
Yeah, I mean, I think of and this is kind of a weird example, but somebody that lives in a remote area that wants to do that kind of technical work that can train. We're getting close to, you're going to be able to have an AI module on your machine and you will be able to specifically train that module. It will come not tabula rasa, it'll have programming already, but you'll be able to train it to do what you want to do. And you can do it to some degree with Grok and ChatGPT already, right? Like you mentioned, sometimes you get mixed results from these things, which is true, but you can also correct it, right? You can say, no, what I meant was this. Like anytime I'll ask Grok a question, be like, hey, why is this dumb? And it'll be like, well, here's the reasons why people might not like it, and here's blah but here's the other. Like, I don't want to hear any of that other shit. I just wanted to hear what I wanted to hear, right? And you tell it that, and it'll spit the information that you actually want back out. We're getting close to, I would say, somewhere in the next 24 months, people are going to have a semi, or at least businesses will have a semi-affordable version of that to map onto their fucking networks, where people can start manipulating it and doing stuff like that. And if you live in a remote area and you're able to automate some of this stuff and then go outside and, I don't know, grow your own food instead of waiting for the government to bring it to you or whatever the hell and putting all the poison they put in there, then I think you've made your life considerably better. Or you could stay home and hang out with your kids more or whatever it is, right?
Right. Yeah, no, exactly. Anytime you can find that productivity. So, I mean, that's the labor market today. It's exciting. It's scary for some people who don't want to learn and change. But, it's happening. And it'll just be interesting because this labor market is a tricky one right now, right? We are, as we remove 20 plus million immigrants who have been, I think, propping up, because we have a lot of individuals who are not working since COVID. There's, depending on different estimates, but I saw one estimate that 3.5 million men who are 25 to 35 years old, which is kind of the prime building your career, building your knowledge, building your experience years, are not working. So 3.5 million kind of prime age, working age men are not even participating in the labor market. They're not in unemployment. They're not in the numbers there. They're just in their parents' basement playing video games on opioids. So you have like this problem where Americans have not been working. And I think COVID fundamentally changed our relationship with work. And so we've been propping up this labor market with a lot of illegal immigrants, which I think they, especially the criminals, need to be deported. We need to figure out what does immigration look like that's actually legal. Illegal immigration should stop. And I'm a big fan of having them not be here. But it is going to cause a really interesting dynamic because we're going to be short on workers. We've had, you see this with colleges. There's not as many high schoolers coming through. We've killed a lot of babies over the last 40 years. People don't have big families anymore. And so this labor market's going to be really interesting. And honestly, we need something like AI. We need other tools to be able to make people more productive because there's going to be more work out there than people to do it, which is a good opportunity for, my kids, because I know if they're hardworking, smart, know how to look someone in the eye, they're going to have tons of opportunities in the labor market. But we need some of these technologies because we don't have enough people to get all the work done. We need people to be more productive. So I don't know. I think it'll be fascinating to watch how all this plays out over the next several years.
Yeah, I mean, our civilization is kind of under attack right now. And if you don't believe that, just the way you categorize this, we have millions of people in their prime age, millions of men in their prime age, in their parents' basement playing video games on opioids. That sounds a lot like Brave New World Soma to me, right?
Oh, yeah.
I mean, this is as dystopian as it gets. This idea that we kill your individuality, kill your purpose, put you on drugs so you'll follow and do whatever we say you're going to do. That we've written so many books about this over the years. And they were not playbooks. They were warnings.
Yeah, they were. And you look at the Roman Empire before its fall, like most of the citizens they didn't know how to work anymore. They were on drugs. They were addicted to sexual sins. Like they were just like, this was the world they lived in. And then they just brought in immigrants to run their police force and their army. And then lo and behold, the non-citizens who they brought in to do all this work were like, hey, guess what? I don't want to do it anymore. And that was a pretty catastrophic fall. And I'd like to avoid that. We need citizens who are working. And people who don't know how to work, who are sitting on that couch in their parents' basement, that's bad for your soul, right? And I'm worried about the economy. I'm worried about these things, but I'm worried about your soul. Like it is not good for you to be a lazy ass. Yeah. Like it's just for anyone. And so we need to get people back to work, stop subsidizing them, get rid of the illegal immigrants. So we have to pay these people to get to work. And if we can do that, I'm optimistic about America. We don't have to follow the track of the Roman Empire and so many empires before us where you get fat and sassy and happy. You bring in, immigrants to do all your work and then you crumble. I think we have a chance of not following that exact path.
Yeah, what you're describing is the barbarian tribes from the north.
That's right.
Came into Rome, and the Romans tried to fight it off a couple times. So at one point, they outlawed slavery in Rome. Like you couldn't bring in any new slaves. They didn't outlaw slavery, but you couldn't bring in any new slaves because freedmen and Roman citizens had no jobs left, right? So kind of a parallel we might see today. But then directly after that, what Rome realized was that, these people aren't going to work, so we got to do something. The work's got to get done, right? And the barbarians came in from the north and eventually became the Eastern Roman Empire, right? It was the Byzantines. They eventually became the Eastern Roman Empire. We don't want that. And then to your other point about, getting to work and having purpose and stuff like that. To me, it all begins, like certainly instilling a sense of purpose in somebody early on, work ethic, all this stuff, and then teaching them the relationship between effort and outcome is super important as well. But part of it is also national pride, which for some reason we're not allowed to have anymore. I don't understand that. I mean, I do. It's Marxist nonsense, but G.K. Chesterton, and I say this a lot actually because I think it's a really important statement, said very frequently that men didn't love Rome because she was great. Rome was great because men loved her. And, this idea, one that you espoused earlier about wanting to be successful, not just for yourself, but for the betterment of those around you and your community and your country ultimately, is something that's very important, right? And it can't happen if people are ashamed of themselves for being part of which, by the way, is the greatest empire in the history of the world, just to be clear, right? There's this old saying that the sun never set on the British Empire. Well, guess where you are, buddy? You're in the evolution. You're in the evolved version of the British Empire. We are the best country that has ever existed, and it's not even close. So, we've really got to get back. And it isn't about like, oh, America's great and fuck everybody else. It's like America's great. Let's keep it great. And then if we can help you, we'll help you out. Right. I mean, that's Trump talks about this a lot. The power of our economy is that we can literally export it to other countries and heal them when they're broken. We did this with the Marshall Plan. We did it in Japan. Right. And now for a very long time, Germany and Japan were the top economies in the world, other than China and the United States. As a matter of fact, they still are to some degree, right? Germany's struggling with some stuff. Japan's struggling with their birth rate and stuff like that. But for a good 50, 60-year period, Japan and Germany were the top economies in the world that weren't us. And that's the power of the U.S. You know what I mean? We've got to do something about the understanding of history that the average person has, because you can see this nihilism sprouting up and taking deep, deep root now. It isn't just something that's happening. It's something that's been forced upon us.
Yeah, no, I think that's absolutely right. And we have to, and sometimes it's overwhelming to figure out like, okay, how do I fix all these things? And my encouragement is always, fix the thing that's right in front of you. And I guess, going back to, why I started RedBalloon. If you read Sun Tzu's The Art of War, one of the things he talks about is to be successful, you need to go after targets that are both feasible and strategic. So, like New York City, that is super strategic, but it's not feasible if you're trying to, win it over in some level, right? And so when I looked at, when I ended up leaving my last business and kind of looked at the world around me, I'm like, okay, what's the strategic feasible thing that I think I have the skill set to be able to go move the needle on? And if I look at like mainstream media, like CNN, like honestly, they're not, that's not feasible. It would be strategic if CNN started to actually report the news. That'd be really cool. But I don't think it's feasible. I think that's an uphill battle that's just not going to be accomplished. Well, let's look at higher education, because education is such a huge driver of where a society is going to go. And I look at the Harvards and the Princetons of the world, like, again, not feasible. Totally strategic to be able to turn those universities into places where people actually efficiently get education that's going to drive meaningful, positive impact on the rest of their life. I think that would be amazing, but I don't see it happening anytime soon. They're far too entrenched there. But then I looked at the world of work. And the world of work, the wokeness in the workplace has only been there for, call it 15 years, maybe less. And it's really, really been pushed hard over the last 4 or 5 years. But before that, there's still a lot of capitalists in the world of work. There's a lot of people who are kind of going along to get along on all this stupid stuff that's been happening. But I think they'd turn in a minute because they don't actually believe it. Okay, so that makes it feasible. Well, is it strategic? Well, the reality is that most of your waking hours are in your work. And so it's going to have a huge impact on how you see the world around you, how you see people around you, and how you perceive those things, and how you generate wealth that's going to take your family on vacation or restaurants, or how your kids are going to go to school, et cetera. So it's clearly both strategic and feasible. Doesn't mean that it's easy, but I do think it is possible to go after it. So that's why I'm like, okay, fine. I can't solve all the problems that are out there, right? And because it can get totally overwhelming. The thing I can solve, or at least I can take a whack at, is this world of work, because I think it's strategic and feasible. And if we can get people back to work, we can get businesses thriving, that's going to solve a lot of problems out there. And that's played out actually pretty well. So,
yeah, I mean, that's kind of what you're describing. That attitude is how you create a business, right? You find a gap.
That's right.
You find a gap in the market, whether it's a product or a service that you can fill. Even if you don't know shit about it, you're like, oh, you know what I heard is that company X and company Y can't get product Z out fast enough, so I'm going to create a company now that'll help them get it out faster. And now you've created Amazon. You know what I mean? Like,
exactly.
Come on, man. This is America. There's no limits here. You can fucking get it done. Now, we've definitely got to get rid of some of this regulation and stuff. And definitely, I think I agree with you. I think as you phrase it, the world of work is quite a bit more. It's quite a bit more open for change and competition, because at the end of the day, they have to report to their shareholders. A university they just gobble up the money. There's no competition for it. It's bullshit, right? The whole business model is socialist nonsense. an actual company. And to be fair, a publicly traded company, it's the stock and not the product necessarily that's their product. Fair enough. But there's still ways to influence that stuff, right? I mean, Vivek Ramaswamy and Anton Frericks are doing it right now with their Thrive VC companies. What they do is they invest minimum $20 million in a publicly traded company if you need capital, but you have to like sign paperwork saying no DEI, no CRT, fuck you, right?
Exactly.
And that's the only way you get the money. That's a way that you can use. Look, not everybody's got that kind of capital to throw into something, but certainly this is the American ideal. It's finding a gap in the marketplace and solving for it, right? Which is funny because it's an analog for a lot of stuff. Even Bitcoin, for example. The way that you mine a Bitcoin is that you have a computer that solves a problem, and when the problem is solved, you've got a Bitcoin. Like this idea stretches across every, like, from tech just to the idea of the workplace in general, right? Now, you've mentioned many times before, and it's probably why you guys started this company, but I'll let you speak for yourself on that even like the big like recruiting companies, Indeed, ZipRecruiter, stuff like that, are immersed in this woke nonsense, right? I mean, certainly they're just playing whatever trends are available, and maybe some of it is even algorithmic.
Sure.
But there have been executives from those two companies that have spoken quite a bit about this stuff. So it's not on accident, right?
No, absolutely. And I think that's, as I was looking at the market, I started talking to businesses who were like, well, I posted jobs on Indeed, and I described my business, which is perfectly legal, as God-fearing and freedom-loving. That's just how they describe their business. We're, a construction company. We're an auto mechanic, and we are God-fearing and freedom-loving. We're patriots. We believe that America is the greatest country. The Constitution is actually a really good document, and Indeed canceled them for life. They said, no, you are violating our community standards. We don't want you to be able to hire. The other thing, and we've seen a lot of that, and I do think that's going to start to dial down a little bit because they're going to be less freaked out about trying to keep the woke-tards happy. But you also have this systematic algorithms, and we've seen this with Greenhouse, which is big ATS out there, but Indeed as well, where they actually they have a worldview, and they're going to use their algorithm to push their worldview, right? If you believe that Facebook and Google have done this and continue to do this at some level, where they're pushing their worldview through their algorithm, these companies are doing the exact same thing. They are systematically removing white conservative candidates from actually being able to, be in front of the hiring manager at all. So, if you're on Indeed and you post a job, you're going to get 1,000 responses. So Indeed's going to decide which responses are probably worth your time. Well, their algorithms are going to look at skin color. They're going to look at other social media characteristics of the people who are applying, and they're going to put the people forward that they think would be a good fit for you. And unfortunately, that means they're going to be pushing their worldview in your hiring process. And we all know the cost of a bad hire is overwhelming. If you hire someone inside your business who is trying to destroy your business, you are going to, in many cases, it's going to cost you hundreds of thousands of dollars. We have two customers who are now using RedBalloon, but they were just using a big Main Street job board, ended up hiring people who were actively trying to destroy their business. And you're like, oh yeah, right. Well, what do you mean by that? Well, they were unlocking doors on weekends. They were unplugging servers. They were leaking financial information because these were pro-patriot, pro-God businesses, and these people were taking a paycheck while trying to destroy them. Then those businesses are like, hey, you're doing this, I need to fire you. And they're like, great, here's my lawyer. I'm now suing you for discrimination because you're trying to fire me. I talked to a business down in California. He's like, I had a $15 an hour employee who brought a lawsuit, and after 3 months of fighting and legal fees mounting up and just the emotional drain of this person who was on my team is now suing me because they believe in some fake discrimination charge. He ended up just closing his business. He's like, you know what? I'm out. I'm going to move to a new state and just start over because it's not worth it. Well, let's try and avoid that, and that's what RedBalloon.work helps with. But yeah, a lot of these businesses, the Indeeds, the Greenhouses of the world, they're using their algorithms because their worldview is so entrenched. And a lot of these HR people, and I could go down an HR rabbit hole for a long time, are pushing a worldview so hard. These businesses aren't hiring who they think are the best. They're not based on merit. They're based on skin-deep diversity.
Yeah. And to your point about mistakes in hiring, there's if you haven't read Ray Dalio's book Principles, I think everybody should read that, just for, a lot of it is about business principles, but one of the principles is hire slow, fire fast, right? And, and it means take your time picking the right candidates, and if somebody's not working out, get rid of them now. There's bad news doesn't get better with time. I think that's something that you could also apply to your personal life, not just your romantic relationships, but your friends, right? We've seen who are and are not friends over the past 5 years now. But to the point of specifically hiring bad candidates, mentioned before, it's 6-9 months worth of their salary to get somebody like that on, typically, right? With all the processes and all this other horse shit. If you're hiring $100,000 employees, that's $62,500 every time you make a mistake. It's a $62,000 mistake. And not many businesses can afford to do that. I guarantee you, if you've got a small business and you're trying to plus up right now, if you've got a business with less than 50 employees and you're trying to get bigger right now, and you're throwing $60,000 onto the fire, you're not going to survive as a company, right?
Yeah, that's for sure. No, it is crazy. And again, businesses have shut down, 75, and this is a horrible stat, but I'll tell you, it's from the EEOC. 75% of businesses in America have had a labor-based lawsuit in the last 5 years. 75%. Well, that means it's not just the cost of getting that person up to speed and then having to fire them. What if you have to fire them and then let's throw a cherry on top of it? There's a lawsuit associated with it. So we recommend to businesses who are, if you're running a good hiring process, you should be spending between 20 and closer to 30 hours on each hire that you're bringing into your business. So, and if you're a small business owner, you're like, holy mackerel, there's no way that I can spend 30 hours per hire because there's just no way. Well, actually, you're going to pay regardless. So you might as well put the work in up front or pay someone like RedBalloon or somebody else to help you with that process, because otherwise it's going to cost you that. Even if you're not writing a $60,000 check, it doesn't feel like that. You're going to be making those payrolls. You're going to be losing productivity. You're going to be losing customers, right? Especially if these people are customer facing. It's terrible to get the wrong person in front of your customers. It's going to destroy your brand. It's going to hurt your business. Another study said that managers today in America spend 17 hours a week dealing with bad hires in their organization.
My God, dude, that's 30% of your time.
30% of your time dealing with people rather than just firing them. Like, people problems don't get better with time. They get better with an awkward conversation or you taking action.
And then the other part of that is you said you pay for this regardless, both paying for it literally and then paying for it in lack of productivity and creating new customers. Now, we've mentioned this. It costs 7 to 12 times more to create a new customer than it does to keep an existing one. You also have to take into account, and this is a bit in the weeds, but you have to take into account the time value of money. If we're in a high inflationary period, right, that productivity, that dollar that you could have made last year is now costing you money, right? You're now making 98 cents at best, typically, because we're at 2% average. That's our goal, is 2% average per year. You're at best making 98 cents on that now, where you could have made money and put it back into your company already. That would be a real asset rather than a currency that's being manipulated by inflation, right? So there's all this stuff going on. Now is always the best time to do something, almost always. Well, there's probably exceptions, but now is almost always the best time to do something. And you don't have time to play games anymore. So tell me how RedBalloon is different. What do you guys do that's different than these other larger, I guess, if you're going to call it, these institutional companies that do hiring and recruiting?
Yeah, and I think giving just a little bit of backstory helps on why we're doing what we're doing. So last business I was running hit 2020, and we're a $50 million tech business that I had helped found. It's a labor market data business. I'm the CEO. I'd sold it 3 different times. So I didn't have much ownership left, but I was still running the business, and we were growing 25% a year with a 40% margin. So we were making an enormous amount of money, blessing customers, doing awesome work, right? 2020 comes around, and my board's like, hey, you're too conservative and Christian for our liking, so we're going to find someone else who has a better social media following than you do.
It seems relevant.
Right. So I'm like, whatever. Anyway, that's the short version. It was a long battle. It was painful. But I'm like, okay, so I'm delightfully unemployed in kind of early, mid 2021. I'm already doing a housing development. I got a bunch of commercial real estate. I'm on the boards of businesses and nonprofits. I'm like, I got plenty to say grace over. I'm going to play a little golf, hang out with my kids, shoot my guns, and not stress about getting a new job. But then someone challenged me. They're like, you were just given a choice between your job and your values. Because the board basically told me, if you can just keep who you are on the weekends, we'll let you keep your job. I'm like, well, I cannot do that. You get all of me or none of me. And so I'm like, well, yes, I did have to choose between my job and my values. They're like, do you think other Americans are going to have to do that? I'm like, well, sure. They're like, why don't you make a job board or some landing place so people don't have to make that decision, or if they do make the decision, it costs them their job, they can find something else. So I'm like, okay, fine. RedBalloon.work. Ta-da. I've made a job board. I kind of put it out there. I didn't want to start another business, though. I was just going to kind of make a place for businesses and for employees to find each other. Cool. And it just kind of started working because, people were getting a little excited. And then the vaccine mandate comes around, like literally a couple months after I founded this thing. And my stance was, look, you're an adult. If you want to get a vaccine, knock yourself out. But that's a discussion you should have with your doctor, not your HR department. And that was so controversial in kind of mid to late 2021 that all of a sudden I was on Fox News and I was on Glenn Beck and all these shows just talking about like, hey, freedom. It's what made America great. Let's just let everybody make their own decisions. Let's not try and get up in their business. Anyway, so we blow up this job board, and all of a sudden we've got many thousands of businesses and millions of job seekers who are finding each other. And back to my theory of redeeming the world of work and kind of this feasible and strategic, I start getting thousands of thank you notes from perfect strangers saying, hey, look, you changed the trajectory of my family. You saved my marriage. I'm engaged in my community more because of the job I'm in. The job I am in has affected all these other areas in your life. I'm like, okay, so clearly it's strategic, and I think we're making headway, so it may be feasible. So that's where RedBalloon.work comes from, just a job board. As we race forward, and you asked how we differentiate, like job seekers sign a pledge that, hey, I'm going to show up to work and not be a whiner. Right? And you'd be surprised how many are like, yeah, no thanks. And we put a big American flag waving in the background, and they're like, no, that's not for me.
Yeah, that's an important thing to do, by the way, if you're trying to run a certain type of business. Instead of, you don't always have to dig in on the individual specifically if you create what I call self-selection roadblocks in the way, right?
Correct.
Height and weight standards in the military is a good example of that. Or the ability you've got to do 15 pull-ups to be here. Otherwise, get the fuck out, right? It's a very hard, fast thing. You either like it or you don't. If you show up here and have them sign paperwork to that effect, obviously. I think that's a very smart thing to do.
Yeah, so we do that on the job seeker. And then on the business side, like, hey, if you want to be part of RedBalloon and you want to get access to the best talent, the hardworking conservatives who are here, you just need to agree that the Constitution's a good thing and that you're going to protect the freedom of your current and future employees. No big deal. In fact, I've had businesses be like, man, I really want to be part of RedBalloon. I'm like, all right, no problem, no DEI, and no making your employees do gay pride flags in June. Easy for me to say. That's all you need to do. Like, actually let them have their worldview and not push your worldview down their throat. And so we do this, and all of a sudden we start making all these connections. Then we had a number of businesses like Louder with Crowder, who's a good customer, say, hey, is there any way you could actually recruit for me? Because sometimes the best people out there, they're not the people who are applying to job postings. They're already happily employed, but they might be awesome at my business, and they might be excited about joining something great. And so we start doing recruiting. I hate, and sorry if you're a recruiter out there and you're listening, I use recruiters, and I hated it literally every time because the incentive structure is all bunged up. If you've ever used it's wild. An outsourced recruiter, right? It's like 30 to 40% of the first year compensation that you pay them. They'll sometimes have a 6-month or a 3-month or a 1-year guarantee. And so you hire that $100,000 person, you pay $30,000 to $33,000 to a recruiter, and they might have met that person 20 minutes earlier on LinkedIn. We don't know. And then you've got this person, and the incentives for the recruiter are to get you the most expensive person as quickly as possible. That's just what, like, they could be a good person, but incentives always win. And so I'm like, okay, so how do we actually build a structure where the incentives are aligned towards the people actually paying me, which would be the employers? So we started this process where we do, for $4,500, we will run a recruitment process where we'll help you write your job description. We'll do a compensation review. We will help you understand and articulate your company values so that we can use that in the interview rubric that we're going to use to filter people. And then we're going to get to work, and we're going to do inbound and outbound work. We're going to give you market feedback on what people are saying about the job. We're going to do a first interview to make sure they're not a waste of your time and that they're a good culture fit and a skill fit for what you want. And then we're going to bring you people with a one-page write-up on why they're worth your time and a conversation. We do all that for $4,500. And then when you hire someone on the back end of that, we charge a $4,500 flat success fee. And so we have placed CFOs, CEOs, but also executive assistants where you're like, I don't have that 30 hours to put into the hiring process, but I want to know with blessed assurance that I'm not getting myself, a new hire who has cultural C4 strapped to their chest coming in to blow up my business. Yeah. And so that's what we do. And I think we did 350 positions last year with over a 90% success rate. So it has been really fun to kind of be part of the story, not just for the job seeker, but also for the businesses of like, that you're going to have the right people inside your four walls that are going to help build your business, build your culture, not just maintain it, but like, how do we add to it? How do we take it to the next level? How do we really grow and strive? And so and that's what RedBalloon does today. So we're the nation's leading pro-freedom job board. We just have businesses and job seekers who think freedom's a good thing. We do recruitment, and then we have some great software to help you hire throughout your entire process. So there you go. That's it. That's the RedBalloon story.
Okay. Well, give me if you could summarize what is different for job seekers on the platform other than these other places.
Yeah, so
that's mostly who you're going to be talking to on this show, or people that are looking for work, companies that aren't retarded, frankly.
Yeah, exactly. So if you want to work for a company that's not retarded, they're going to be on redballoon.work. Everything's free for job seekers. You're in a spot where you are trying to figure out what's the next step in your story. And so everything's free for job seekers. You can fill out your job seeker profile for free, and I think you'll find it a delightful process. And you're now part of a database where employers can actually tap you on the shoulders and say, hey, you might be the right person for me. I'd like to bring you in for an interview. Obviously, you can apply to jobs. There's also a bunch of free resources. So there's an employee bill of rights and responsibilities written by our labor lawyer, whose name is Laura, which is fun to say, Laura the labor lawyer. And Laura the labor lawyer was a Harvard law degree, was a labor lawyer in the People's Republic of California for 20 years. And she wrote this document on what are your rights and your responsibilities as an employee. If you want to push back against DEI training or any of the crazy COVID stuff that was coming down, like where are you allowed to push back legally? And then what are your responsibilities that are associated with that? And so all of these resources are free. We want to bless job seekers. We want you to be on there. And then we want businesses to come and find you and then have that delightful career change that will be awesome for your life.
Great. Well, that's about as good a pitch as you're going to get. We got to get going now, but thank you for coming on the show today. I had a good conversation. I really enjoyed this. And if you're out there and you're looking for work or you're looking for good employees and you don't want to deal with any of the bullshit, frankly, probably go to redballoon.work. And
.work, because .com stands for communist. I don't know if you know.
Yeah, fair. I don't think it. I think it stands for commercial. But it's probably communist.
It does. I just made that
up. Go to redballoon.work. Check out the site, and you guys have a good thing going on. I appreciate what you're doing.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me. Excited to have alternative media and opportunities to actually learn what's going on in the world from people like you. So thanks for having me, and I hope everybody has an awesome day.
Yes, sir, anytime, and thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.